The final bill added an additional $8 billion to go a step further to provide another layer of protection
and
for.
I understand that, but some opponents call that a Band-Aid. They say it's just not enough money.
Well, that's not the only piece of it that has coverage for pre-existing conditions. Again, the president wanted to focus on those that were most vulnerable, whether it's people with pre-existing conditions or the unborn. He was certainly focused on protecting the most vulnerable.
Can the president guarantee those Americans
This
they won't
is
see
like
their
12
premiums
question
go up?
Friday.
Just
instead
a
of
follow-up. But can those with pre-existing conditions and older Americans be guaranteed that they won't see hikes in the prices they pay?
That's the whole point of this bill, is to lower costs across the board, not just for those with pre-existing conditions, but to create competition so you have lower premiums, to give states flexibility. That's the entire purpose of reforming this system, is to have lower costs. So yes, that would be the goal, and certainly, again, the priority of the president. Margaret?
Thank you, Sarah. Really interesting, and I thought surprising story in Politico saying that there's a plan by the Trump administration to gut the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us, is that report correct, and why? Is the thinking I mean, obviously he cares about the opioid addiction problem. We've talked about that and brought Chris Christie in the mix. What would be the reason for gutting that office, and is it to move it somewhere else? I've got a French election question also. I'll wait though.
Look, my first piece of advice would never be to use Politico for a source of for your story, but in terms when it comes to the opioid epidemic, I think the president's been extremely clear this is a top priority for him. I certainly wouldn't get ahead of conversations about the budget. We haven't had a final document, and I think it would be ridiculous to comment on a draft version of something at this point.
Would you loosely address the idea that he's contemplating a substantial cut to that office and to move that sort of work outside of that office?
I'm not going to comment on ongoing discussions. Again, there's not a final document. When there is, we'd certainly be happy to discuss that. I think the bigger point here is the president has made very clear that the opioid epidemic in this country is a huge priority for him, something he is certainly very focused on tackling, and something that I think was ignored by the previous administration that won't go ignored in this one.
Thanks. So I got France. I totally might in a second. French elections, we know President Obama has a dog in the fight. Does President Trump have a dog in the fight? If so, who? And if not, does he at least have a prediction on who's going to take it and whether that matters?
I haven't had the opportunity to have a conversation with him about whether or not he supports any particular candidate, but I can tell you that the president will work with whoever the people of France decide to elect. That's a decision that they need to make, but the president's committed to working with leaders across the globe to combat a whole host of issues, and certainly would do that with whoever the people elect.
Thanks. Could you just address what the president, I have two questions I should say, I want to preface this, not 12 though. The president's comments yesterday, does he really think that Australia's government-run universal healthcare system is better than ours?
I think he was simply being complimentary of the prime minister, and I don't think it was much more than that.
Okay, and then I want to ask you about this case out of Maryland. As you probably know, the prosecutors have dropped the rape charges against the two undocumented teens accused of attacking that 14-year-old classmate. This White House was vocal on that case. From this podium, Sean Spicer said that a big part of the reason the president has made illegal immigration and crackdown such a big deal is because of tragedies like this. Did this White House unfairly jump to conclusions in this case?
Look, I think that we're always looking to protect the American people. Sean was speaking about what he knew at the time, and certainly I haven't had a chance to dive into the latest on that, but we will, and we'll get back to you.
You want to retract anything that the White House has said so far?
I'm not going to retract anything without further information in front of me.
Can I follow up on that? Have you talked to Sean, and does he have any regrets about what he said?
I have not talked to Sean. He is on Navy duty, where you don't get to carry your phone around very often, I don't think. So, I mean, I talk to him every day, but I haven't yet today. So
Sarah,
when I do, I'll certainly ask him.
On that question, is there a general danger that the White House, through its rhetoric, is animating too many people to jump to conclusions against immigrants, and in the process diminishing the entire immigrant community, whether they're law-abiding or not?
Not at all. The president has been incredibly outspoken against crime in any form, fashion, certainly from his joint address to his speech last week on the Holocaust Remembrance Day. look, this is a law and order president. He's focused on restoring law and order. We've seen a spike in crime and rates starting in 2015 across the board, not just in any particular sector. I think that's why he campaigned and talked so much about needing to restore law and order in this country. It's why he's focused on securing our border, stopping drug trafficking, human trafficking. Those are things that have been a priority for him, and I think that the reason is because he places such a high value on that. And I think to call into question his rhetoric to be anything other than somebody who has condemned hate and violence in all of its forms is simply just a complete misrepresentation of not only who the president is, but of what he's said. Matthew?
Thanks, Sarah. Back to healthcare. We've talked about how there will be changes in the Senate, and you've said the White House is open to that as long as the principles remain the same. I was wondering if we could get a little more specificity on specifically what principles and how they're represented in the current House bill. So, for example, is a state's ability to waive essential health benefits and the pre-existing conditions protections, that the Freedom Caucus negotiated so hard for, does that have to stay in the bill for the president to support it?
Look, again, I think that the biggest piece of that is to allow states that flexibility, that the people that are closest to the people getting care are the ones helping make that decision.
That has to stay.
Look, I'm not going to litigate the details from here, but that's part of the legislative process and part of the ongoing discussions. But I know that it's a priority for the president as well to protect people with pre-existing conditions.
Just to follow up on that, so we heard a lot of the rhetoric about repealing the Affordable Care Act being about job creation, and you cited those jobs numbers at the beginning. I think we're in month 86 straight of job growth. And we're hearing less of the talking point about Obamacare killing jobs. Does the president still stand by that this was a job killer and that that's a reason to repeal it, or has he moved on from that argument?
I certainly think he stands by that comment.
But how do you explain the consistent growth since that act was
Well, I
passed?
think other things have taken place. Just because one thing may be killing jobs, that doesn't mean you can't have job growth in other sectors. Primarily, the places where we saw the most growth in this jobs report were in manufacturing, coal miners, other places. So I certainly think you can have job growth even when there are job-killing regulations.
Sarah, back to the comment that the president made to the Australian Prime Minister. Are you saying that he didn't mean what he was saying when he said that they have a better healthcare system?
I'm saying that the president was complimenting a foreign leader on the operations of their healthcare system, and that it didn't mean anything more than that.
But he doesn't believe they have a better healthcare system?
I think he believes that they have a good healthcare system for Australia. Again, that's one of the biggest things that is wrong with Obamacare. It's tried to be a one-size-fits-all, and that's the opposite of what the plan is that we're putting in place right now. It allows for state flexibility. What works in Australia may not work in the United States. So I think, again, he was complimenting the Prime Minister, and we're focused on putting a healthcare plan in place that works here. Carol Lee?
The Pentagon said today that a Navy SEAL was killed in Somalia, the first in quite some time. Does the White House any comment on that? Is the President briefed on that? Should we expect a statement from him?
The president has been briefed on that. He spoke directly with General McMaster earlier today. Obviously, we first and foremost want to express our deepest condolences and our deepest appreciation for all of the men and women in the military and the ultimate sacrifice that they paid, particularly this soldier and all of the others. The president has made it certainly a major priority to protect the men and women who protect us. That's one of the reasons that he wanted to put so much emphasis on rebuilding the military, and that was a priority for him in the budget. And again, our deepest sympathies and condolences go out to all of the men and women in uniform, and particularly this family.
Should we expect a statement from him?
From the president? I don't know at this time if I know he doesn't want to get ahead of the notification process, and that's still taking place at this point.
Sarah.
Abby?
Hey, Sarah. So the president tweeted this morning that he's saving taxpayers money by working from Bedminster over the weekend instead of New York City, but would he not save more money by simply working out of the White House? And why is he making that sort of comparison?
Well, look, this is the president's first time to be back in the New York metro area, and he's staying at his private residence in New Jersey versus staying in Manhattan. Had he stayed in Manhattan, the disruption would have been far greater than being in New Jersey. The bottom line is the president no matter where he goes, and he doesn't get to control the level of costs and security that may come along with that.
But he does control where he works. Why doesn't he work more from the White House? He spent the last maybe 14 weekends.
You guys complain we work too much around here and that you're too tired, and now we don't work enough.
For the purposes of cost and savings to American taxpayers, which he raised this morning.
Again, this is the president's first time to go back home to the New York metro area, and I think he's trying to save the taxpayers' money the best way he can by taking his team and focused and being in New Jersey instead of in New York, where it would have caused a much greater disruption and a much greater cost to taxpayers. Amen.
Thanks, Sarah. Earlier you mentioned this morning's big jobs report, and you also cited the president's tax plan as one of the reasons for that job growth. Are you saying the tax plan that hasn't passed yet was responsible for creating jobs in the month of April?
What I'm saying, I think we saw from the very beginning, the minute that the president was actually elected, even before he took office, you saw consumer confidence go up. We've had meetings with countless CEOs, small business owners, people that are involved in job creation come in and tell us that they are much more confident in going out and hiring people, building their businesses, and growing the economy because they have a president who actually cares about it and is focused on it like this one is. So I certainly think that the environment that he is creating is much more friendly, not just through the tax reform system, but by laying out those priorities. They know what's coming down the line. They have confidence in this president like they didn't in the previous one. But it's not just that. It's getting rid of all the job-killing regulations that we've seen through executive orders, and again, a focus on rhetoric of creating jobs, and that certainly has added to that.
And also on jobs, Apple announced this week that it's creating a $1 billion fund to spur manufacturing job growth inside the United States. Can you tell me what communications the White House has had with Apple either before or after that announcement, if any?
I'm not aware, so I'll have to check and get back to you on that. Dave?
Sarah, thanks. Does the president still intend to sign the spending bill today?
Yes, I believe actually he signed it just within the last hour.
Would he ever consider using, President Obama, for example, got some criticism over the years for adding signing statements to legislation to, indicate where he disagreed with the bill he was signing. President Bush did the same thing on a number of occasions. Does this president intend to ever use that option?
I'm not aware of that. It's something I'd have to check on and get back to you.
Sarah, thank you. You were talking a minute ago about states wanting flexibility. Do you know which states are likely to seek a waiver on pre-existing conditions?
Not yet. That was something that probably HHS would have a better handle on, and I'd refer you to talk to them.
Hey Sarah, I was going to ask you, before the summer travel season kicks off, we're seeing more of these airline incidents. We saw Delta apologizing for what happened from that Hawaii flight. We saw what happened with United. Earlier this week, the Senate and the House had some CEOs on the Hill. Does the president want DOT or FAA to work more closely with the airlines to maybe better establish what passengers can expect if they're going to get kicked off a flight, or what the rules should be? Would this be something where maybe the government could clarify what the law should be?
I haven't had that conversation. That's something we certainly would have to look at. But what I could tell you is that I don't think anybody in the administration thinks that the handling of some of these passengers is probably a good thing. And so we want all people across the board to be treated with the utmost respect, whether that's on an airline or anywhere else. I don't know that that's a government regulation that should weigh in to do that. Hopefully that's just common decency, but it's certainly something worth taking a look at.
Sarah.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Now that the House has health care reform off its plate, they're likely to take up tax reform. Does the administration have a position as to whether or not the legislation that ultimately emerges from the House Ways and Means Committee should be deficit neutral?
That's something that we would probably have to look at, and I'm not ready to comment right now.
And on the health care reform legislation that the Senate will soon take up, will the administration play a part in what that bill looks like, or are you just going to essentially be hands-off and let the Senate do its work?
I think we've made very clear we're going to be hands-on in this process. It's a priority to fix a very broken system. Obamacare